When we think of miracles, things like healings, exorcisms, major supernatural events, we tend to picture them way back in the distant past, right? Like it's a feature of the ancient world. The common assumption is that the age of miracles ended a long, long time ago. But what if that assumption is just plain wrong? So let's get right to the heart of it. Here's the big question. Did the power to perform miracles really just, poof, vanish after that first generation of Christians was gone? I mean, this is a debate that has been going on for centuries. Well, way back in 1882, this one theologian, a guy named A.J. Gordon, decided to take this question head on. He built this really detailed case, arguing that, hey, miracles aren't just possible today, they were actually never meant to stop in the first place. So let's dive into his argument. Okay, first up is his argument from reason. Gordon doesn't start with history, he starts with logic. He basically goes after the fundamental reasons people give for why miracles would have stopped. So there's this really common view, right? That miracles were basically just temporary scaffolding. The tools you need to get the church started, but once the building's up, you take the scaffolding down. It's done its job. But Gordon comes along and says, nope, that's not it at all. He argues they weren't scaffolding. They were meant to be permanent signs, kind of like baptism or the Lord's Supper, things that are always supposed to point to a deeper spiritual reality. And he uses this really great analogy. He says, think about a traveling salesman. A good salesman doesn't just talk about his product, right? He brings samples. He lets you see it, touch it, taste it. For Gordon, that's exactly what miracles were. They were samples of God's kingdom, a real, tangible taste of what's to come. He even has a name for these samples, the first fruits of the kingdom. So in his mind, a miraculous healing isn't just some random act of kindness. Oh no, it's a concrete preview. It's like a down payment on that ultimate promise of the redemption of the body that all believers are waiting for. Think of it like a signpost, or even the trailer for the main event. And this whole line of thinking led Gordon to ask a bunch of really pointed questions. Here's the first one. If these miraculous samples were so important for kicking things off, for introducing the kingdom, then why on earth would they just completely disappear later on? And he follows that up with another one. He asks, does it really make any sense that Jesus would be less willing to heal people now when he's in a position of ultimate power at the right hand of God than he was when he was just walking around on earth? For Gordon, that logic was completely upside down. And his last question in the section is this. Until the final harvest comes, does it seem reasonable that we'd be left completely high and dry, with absolutely none of those first fruits, those little samples of our redemption? To Gordon, the answer was just a clear, resounding no. Okay, so after building this whole case based on reason, Gordon pivots. He turns to the historical record and basically asks, do the facts actually back up the idea that miracles just stopped? And what he finds is really interesting. Gordon points out that, look, the testimonies of miracles didn't just end with the apostles. Not by a long shot. You have major church leaders, guys like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Origen, writing well into the 2nd and 3rd centuries about healings and exorcisms like they were normal, ongoing things happening in their communities. I mean, just take this quote from Justin Martyr. He's writing around 150 AD. That's more than 100 years after Christ. And listen to his language. He's not talking about the good old days. He says, Christian men have healed and do heal. See that? He's talking about it like it's happening right now. And it wasn't just him. Decades later, you have Irenaeus writing with that same totally normal tone. He just casually states that some disciples still heal the sick by laying their hands upon them. Again, the word still is huge. It suggests this is a continuing thing, not some story from the past. So Gordon's big point here is this. The historical record, at least as he reads it, shows this clear, continuous line of miracle claims for at least the first 300 years of the church. And that, of course, flies directly in the face of the idea that everything just stopped cold after the 1st century. But this, of course, leads to the next logical question. If miracles kept happening for centuries, what changed? Did they eventually start to fade away? And if they did, why? Well, Gordon points his finger at one specific moment in history, the age of Constantine, back in the 4th century. This is a massive shift, you guys. It's when Christianity goes from being this persecuted minority religion to suddenly being the favored religion of the Roman Empire. And Gordon argues this caused the church's whole focus to change, from looking forward to a heavenly kingdom to looking around and building a powerful, rich kingdom right here on earth. And according to Gordon, this change led to what he calls a grim irony in how miracles were even talked about. Before Constantine, the stories were all about healing through faith in the living Christ. But after, the focus of miracle reports started to shift to things like touching relics, the bones of dead saints. So this was Gordon's theory in a nutshell. As the church got more comfortable, more powerful here on earth, it kind of lost that intense focus on the future kingdom. And, he argues, when it lost that focus, it also lost these signs and samples, the miracles, that were supposed to be a little taste of that kingdom. So where does all this leave us? Gordon's entire argument, both the logical part and the historical part, is all building to one final, pretty powerful conclusion about why miracles might have faded away.
Because for him, the most important factor wasn't time. It wasn't about living in the 1st century versus the 19th century. It was all about faith. And not just any faith, but a specific kind of faith, one that was intensely focused on the power of a living Christ and the very real promise of his future kingdom.
And this all leads to his final challenge, which he puts out there as a question. He asks, hey, isn't it a simpler solution to say that maybe Christ doesn't do many miracles today because of our unbelief, instead of just insisting that he simply chooses not to do them anymore? It's a huge shift. He puts the responsibility back on human faith, not just on God's will. In fact, Gordon said he saw a pattern throughout history. Whenever there was a big revival of what he called primitive faith, guess what happened? You'd also see a new wave of reports of those evangelical miracles, the same kind that you read about in the early church. For him, the two were totally connected. And that really leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to chew on, doesn't it? If Gordon's 140-year-old argument has any truth to it, if miracles really are more about faith than about a specific time in history, then what does that mean for us, right here, right now?